Yo, what up, street talk, street god, street vlogs, or Kim the house. All right, some thoughts. Street photography, philosophy, and practical. So this is just a combination of everything I've learned thus far and wish I could communicate with you if I was 21 years old all over again. So first and foremost, composition. What is composition? Why does it matter? Blah, blah, blah. Composition means how you put things together, right? Com, with, position, where to place things. So one tip about composition, if you want to create more dynamic compositions, extreme diagonals are a good idea. And another pro tip I have is, take your images, import them into Procreate, and ultimately what's more important about your photograph and the composition is the feeling of the photo. Philosophy. Philosophy means love of knowledge, love of wisdom, and I think inherent in photography and street photography is philosophy. It's why do you shoot photos, for what? For me, my personal thought is there's some sort of hidden joy of artistic and creative thriving, and that's my personal ultimate goal. And I think the question why is quite critical. A lot of people don't know why they make photos and for whom. Simple tip, just delete Instagram. Don't post to Facebook, just post to your own website and blog instead. Disable all the comments. And you could just Google Zen of Eric or go to Eric Kim Y app. Just go to ericKimphotography.com/blog/y. And I don't know, I think street photography is kind of more of a philosophical pursuit, a creative endeavor, and also kind of like a lifestyle and life approach. So when it comes to motivation, how do you stay motivated? I mean, I think a big thing with photography and motivation is kind of like a personal sense of curiosity. You make photos because you're kind of curious how your photos will manifest later in reality. And one of the benefits of using a flash, whether GR2, GR3 with a flash, or some Fuji film camera or Leica, whatever's, you shoot a photo because you're curious how the photos will manifest. And in terms of technique and approach, I think a good way to think about it is, I think there's no real right or wrong way to shoot street photography. A better way to think about street photography is, using flashes and other techniques just because you're curious about how the photos will manifest later in reality. A tip is when I shot this photo of Hwan Kim Lake, you can see all these flowers that kind of pop up, GR2, in a flash. Often when you're using a flash, it brings up these details. And also one critical thing too, outline of people, is the putting on top. What up, street talk, street god, street vlogs, or Kim in the house, all right, to continue our thoughts. So, thoughts on self-value. So I think actually one of the most difficult things as a photographer and as a street photographer is having some sort of self-value for your photos, which means a lot of people upload photos to the internet because they're like, I don't know what people are going to think about my photos, blah, blah. However, one of the most robust things to think about is what do I think about my photos, and also considering to myself, what does my own photos mean to ourselves? 동서의 아빠가 slideshow. So, my simple suggestion is rather than uploading photos to think 동서의 버스 저기 있어요, rather than uploading photos to the internet to ask, you should know some, to ask what people think about your photos. A better goal is to look at your photos and think, what do I think about my photos? So, for example, one thing that I personally like to look at my photos is like a realm of mystery. So even kind of a sense of surrealism where you have, it looks like, honey, 여기 와서 우유 볼래? honey, 아빠가 우유 부을까? 하면 honey, 아빠가 해줘? Okay. This photo I shot in Hanoi. honey가 할래? 한이가 해요? 오케이, 빨리 와요. 오케이. 이거 왔어. 아빠, 오케이. 이거 끝내서 하자. 한이, 이거 아빠 refilling? 우유 super 조금만 있어요. Okay. Okay, 아빠 refilling. Okay. So, girl at a coffee shop saw the tattoo of a eye behind her back. And so to me, this is like a sense of surrealism because I'm photographing the back of a woman's neck. However, you see the tattoo. And so for me, essentially the type of photos I want to make is photos where I look at it and then I sent some sort of mystery and interest and intrigue there. So open-mindedness. Another critical thing to consider is, I suppose, being open-minded enough to think that essentially street photography could be anything and everything. So even as an example, one thing that I personally like to do is when I'm photographing out in the streets, shooting street photography of Cindy, using her as my subject and my muse. So Ricoh GR2 flash when we were back in Vietnam back in the day. Okay. Hi, Tam. About. Yeah, just crouching down, shooting low angles. Another pro tip is a good way to create more surrealism to the photos is by not showing the face. I think by not showing the face, it abstracts the photo and actually doesn't make it look like a real life quote human being. And that's always a point of interest because visually, you're just trying to fill in the blanks. So child's mind. Ironically enough, if you want to become a better photographer, become more like a child's mind. They say this a lot in Zen. Essentially, child's mind is best mind, or beginner's mind is the best mind. The general gist is, if you look at a kid photographing, like I essentially send my Ricoh, now my Lumix, ever since he was like 6 months old, ever since he's old enough. People are like, oh, this is scary, the kid's gonna throw the camera. It's like, no, your kid's not stupid. It's like, you explain to your kid that this is an important thing, is not going to, oh wait, 1 second. Hi, Lily. All right, continuing our show. So child's mind. So child's mind is essentially approaching everything like it was your first time. Sen is 2 years and 6 months now, and I'm pretty sure he's a genius. A genius is just a kid with good parents, Kanye West. So yeah, I would encourage you, new time parent or whatevs, give your kid a camera as soon as they could hold physical things. 한이 사진 찍어요. 너무 좋아해. And it's so beneficial because, I just did a big talk at Fujifilm for in Saigon in Vietnam. Like 200 people showed up. And yeah, Sen was there, my mom, and Cindy and everything. So Sen understands that like I'm a photographer, famous photographer, whatever. And as a consequence, it's been very beneficial for him to learn more about photography. 네, 아빠가 그림 너무 좋아해. 한이가 그림. 스크린샷. 한이 너 스크린샷 할래? Okay. Okay. 한이가 했어 plus. Plus. 그래서 그림. 오케이, 그림 해봐. 해서 oops. 왜 이러지? Okay, 그림. 네. And yeah, so approaching things like a child. So ever since Sen was like 6 months old, he'd be taking pictures and everything like that. And the great thing with photographing like a child is they're so unobstructive. They don't have notions of good or bad. And I look at Sen's compositions, and now the photos are so fun and curious, and it's like kind of the best way to approach photography. Another good technique in street photography is kind of like layers, right? And to essentially see like layers is just get really close to your subjects, try to fill the frame, add some depth to the photos, etc. Another thing to consider is what is success in photography, street photography. So, I don't know, it's like, I think a lot of people, they're chasing like fame, fortune, blah, blahs. I've did all of it essentially. And so for me now, Simply to stay inspired in my photography is my personal notion of success. And you know, to I think a lot of people essentially after shooting photography for a long time, they lose motivation to make new photos, and they kind of just yeah, essentially it's kind of like a success trap. Is you no longer have the motivation to make new photos because you've already achieved some sort of success. So my thought is, I personally see photography as some sort of ongoing process where you're constantly making photos. Courage. So courage is also critical in photography, street photography, because courage essentially means heart, 뭐죠, 뭐? purple색. And the reason why I think courage is so critical is that the word courage, heart, same word as curate or care. So ultimately, I don't really care whether people are making good photos or not. It's more like, did you have the courage to shoot it or not? And I think street photography is like 99% courage. A pro tip is just shoot places. 동서 그림. Plus. 해서 go down. 해서 연필. Okay. Yeah, so shooting at the bank, stuff like that. So a simple way to think about it, better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. And yeah, just don't treat it like a big deal. When you're in places that you're not supposed to shoot, just shoot and figure it out later. So happiness, if I think of it in Vietnamese, 한폭라기, what is happiness? So for me, 그림 잘한다. The purpose of photography, street photography, is just to be happy, to make photos because they make you happy, and also to spark happiness in the heart of others. And in terms of inspiration, ironically enough, I find the best places to be inspired is outside of photography. A lot of people like to find inspiration in cinema. I mean, for me personally, I like to just go out into the real world and find inspiration there. Like what Forrest Gump said. Forrest Gump? Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And yeah, and I think, I had this challenge kind of a while back, as I call it the 30,000 step a day step challenge, where if you walk 30,000 steps a day, most likely you're going to find things that inspire you to photograph. And yeah, and I think probably the best way to stay inspired and motivated in your photography, street photography, very simple. It's mostly via negativa, like what not to do. Just, delete your Instagram, don't upload to Instagram, Facebook, etc. And rather, my suggestion is to see photography and think of photography as essentially like a continuum, which means it's an ongoing stream of images. My new definition of success as a photographer too. 동서의 그림 잘했어요. This is like, I currently have the Lumix G9, a small JPEG, P mode, whatever. I'm shooting like 1,000 pictures a day. 동서의. Yeah. Apple Maps on mama. Yeah, so just if you could shoot 1,000 photos a day, consider yourself successful. How to see. One of the most important things which I find critical being a photographer, street photographer, etc., is how to see. That means how to spot certain photo opportunities and when to know to click the shutter. One big tip I have is look for a texture. So the hands of a 92-year-old woman, shot with a flash, GR2, also macro mode. And I think with photography, street photography, try to see scenes which you don't always have to photograph people's faces, because sometimes people's hands actually tell more of a story than their faces. And I think this is a good way to approach photography. So even a simple photo project you could do is just photograph just hands. Once again, going back to the idea of new photos, people always try to think, I want to make the perfect photo, get 1 trillion likes and make $1 trillion, whatever. But I think really, once again, the that we should be striving towards as photographers is to just simply have the love, the interest to make new photos. Sociology. So I studied sociology as an undergrad, and I always thought that photography, street photography, is kind of like visual sociology, which means the photos that you're shooting and making are essentially a good way to analyze society. Kichim? Okay. Okay. So yeah, and I think, so for example, being here in Vietnam, kind of some sort of critical commentary, right? Like, I actually find the sociology, mama, triangle, 여봐, triangle 고기, triangle 고기. Triangle, 너무 좋아해. So I find Vietnam to be super interesting. Because there's a huge rising middle class and people trying to get iPhone Pros, whatever. Oh, honey. Oh, triangle. Dungs cross-referencing super dogs. And so yeah, to create some sort of juxtaposition or contrast between things, making some sort of sociological commentary is a good strategy in photography, street photography. So why I love photography? I don't know, just like joy and happiness. Now I got a son. It's kind of changed the game in a good way. It's like 운전. And I don't know, I think that the best photos are the ones that spark joy. The ones that you look at and they just kind of make you smile. I think photography is a good way to augment your happiness. So why I love Vietnam? So one of my most formative experiences in life, 뭐 봤어요? 그 쓰레기 트럭. 아니, 쓰레기 트럭 한 맘마? 이것도 고기도 트리앙글. Yeah, so if you're looking for dynamism, street photography is 공덕 is here in Vietnam. Saigon, Hanoi, both are super great. Higher density of people here, just kind of more action going on. And I don't know, street life here is the best. 기차 잘 찾았어요. Details. So, yeah, like, there's a saying, God is in the details, devil's in the details, whatever. Essentially, the thought is, if you look for details, you will make much better images. So, for example, nowadays, I'm like currently here in District 7, house sitting for a friend. If you're not familiar with Vietnam, it's essentially like being in like Irvine or the boring suburbs. Not much going on out here. But still, you can look for small details like this. And one pro tip I have is when you look for details, you take the image, you invert it. And by inverting the image, you could see the details a little bit more clearly. You could even add kind of like a red filter to better see the details. And then this becomes quite artistic because even though you don't, can't see people, like you could shoot this kind of picture anywhere. And so for me, once again, I'm not so interested in, making a photo that like gets a quadrillion likes on Facebook because I already done it. 잘했어요, honey French toast. It's towards this like visual artist concept. And yeah, like looking for small details like this, the tree here, it kind of stimulates me. Evolution. Thank goodness we're not still fishies in the water. 뭐 먹을래? Hey, pita chip? 이거? Honey, 이거? Evolution. So, I have a theory. So, Henri Cartier-Bresson, towards the end of his life, he essentially gave up photography. Why did he give up photography? I think he just stopped evolving. I think the evolution as a photographer, as a visual artist, I don't know, you should just see more opportunities than see limitations. So even nowadays, I just photograph trash on the ground, stuff like that. I don't know, I just kind of like it because I kind of just don't take it too seriously. And okay, so how does one analyze this? So, 잘했어요. Okay, so let's say I screenshot this. 하이, 농소이. 더 먹을래? Okay. Money? Okay. Yeah, so I just kind of interested in the shape, form, etc. And yeah, you could just photograph these things anywhere. And so finding the visual acuity to have the image sensitivity in your eyeballs to see things on the ground and stuff like that. Just photograph trash, stuff on the ground. Also use your kids. Sometimes you don't see people on the streets, but you could see kind of interesting visual elements. Like, going to the mall. Once again, going to the mall is a great place to shoot street photography and kind of dynamism. Got a little black pink Jenny in the background. And you could essentially create some sort of juxtaposition between the front and the back. And to me, this is quite fun because, I think ultimately for me, it doesn't matter if it's street photography. It's like, as long as I'm making new photos, I'm happy. So going to the mall is quite virtuous. And a classic street photography technique, creating some sort of juxtaposition between people in the background. The mall, I find, is a very fascinating sociological place because, at least in Vietnam, Saigon, a lot of the new evolving economies, even in the States, like Irvine, Urban Spectrum, there's like really no public places to go to hang out besides the gym or the mall. 네, 너무 좋아요. 뭐 보여? 그 택시. 잘, 눈이 좋아요. Hey, taxi and Wagyu. Okay. And also, free air conditioning, I guess, right? So if you want a high density of people, you could go there. Another thing that I found to be a good evolution in my personal thinking is to think of street photography kind of more of a ethos and approach, which means ethos means kind of the sense of something or the soul of something approach. So rather than thinking street photography, 중소와 한이가 피를 직접 쳐줬어요. Rather than thinking of street photography like okay. Rather than thinking that street photography has to be candid, with permission, without permission, blah blah. It's like unrecorded person school of thinking. 바꿔갈래? 바꿔 vacuuming. Okay. So rather than thinking of the whole Henri Cartier-Bresson thing, I mean, he gave up photography. More robust to think instead. More robust instead to think that essentially anything and everything can be street photography. I mean, my personal thought about street photography, as long as it's outside of your own house, it's probably street photography. Because, this thing about it is like, you could shoot street photography at the mall, at home, not at home. Street photography, I don't know, even the approach and technique I think about street photography, kind of like off the cuff, not too seriously, dynamic, to me is essentially street photography. One app I really like on the iPhone, it's called Provoke. It's like $2 on the App Store. Shot with the iPhone SE with a flash. You can make some fun pictures. But yeah, essentially don't worry so much, is this street photography? Is it not street photography? Just make photos, which is fun. So what is the success trap? The success trap is once you've won all the successes and accolades, you create some sort of standard for yourself and you no longer find any photo opportunities. You got a reflection. So don't be trapped for success. Reflection. So yeah, even shooting selfies. Once again, iPhone SE. This is the cheapest iPhone. You could just even use an iPhone to make photos. 한이가 잘 들었어요. 오케이, 아빠가 이거 plug in 했어. 뭐 일로 말땡이. 오케이, 뭐 하고 싶어? GarageBand? 아빠. 오케이. 해서 해. 해서 동서 해. 해서 return. 네. stop. 동서 해서 return. So to become a better street photographer I think it's to just shoot more. Delete. 해서 해. 동서 stop. Okay. 해서 해. 해서 return. 동서 GarageBand return. 잘했어요. Yeah, to just use your iPhone, just shooting in noir mode, and whenever you just kind of see anything, you can shoot street photography. All right, so to continue the show. Da, 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 da. Mystery. So don't always show pictures of the face. A simple way you can make the photos more mysterious is kind of do the minus exposure compensation. So like -2 exposure compensation, -3. Just keep experimenting with it until you make the photos as dark as possible. And the reason I like the darker, more mysterious photos is by not making it super obvious in terms of what's going on, your brain could fill in the details. You could create your own little fun story. 동소이. So now what? 동소이. So after all of your fame, successes, trillions of followers, whatevs, now what? I don't know, I just feel like the inspiration is just keep being inspired to make new photos. So finding fun little visual things in the background, integrating your kids into the photos. How do you go? GoPro? What? 들었어요? 꽉 한번 꽉 한 번만. 오케이 녹음 잘한다. And also a good thing about creativity is to screenshot could also be a good creative endeavor. So whenever you find details that you like, just screenshot it and then use the built-in iPhone, iOS thing to just draw the composition that you see. And the last point is you never know when, right? So the best camera is a camera you can just fit in your front right pocket. So nice photo I shot at the Saigon Mall. Woman reading a book. Feels like it's quite romantic. So yeah, ultimately the ethos of photography, street photography, you never know when a good photo opportunity to happen. So just when in doubt, just shoot it.